Hey guys, it's Penelope in London. What I'm doing today is reading a bit more from the Tao of Fully Feeling. I've already read chapter 9, which you can find on a playlist on my channel. And chapter 9 was about dealing with the inner child and the work that we need to do in order to resolve self-compassionate reparenting, which is really important part of the work. Pete Walker wrote a book called Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. And this is his other book. It's called The Tao of Fully Feeling. So what I want to do today is look at the idea of neglect, because what can happen is that we have emotions around our childhood, and then we might hear, somebody tell us about their childhood, or, I know that when I've told people about my childhood, people say, well, I didn't have it as bad as you, because, some of us have really shocking stories of our childhood, which can really be, quite hard for people to hear. And then some people may have had different types of neglect and consider that the neglect they had in childhood is not, they have no right to complain about it. But I'm going to talk today from chapter 8, and I'm going to page 194 of this book, and I'm talking about emotional neglect. So this is what I'm reading from. So this page, for the most part, mental illness is caused by an absence or defect in the love that a particular child required from its particular parents for successful maturation and spiritual growth. And that was said by M. Scott Peck. He wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And I'm going to continue reading. So Pete Walker says, when parents are emotionally repressed, children are deprived of models for healthy emotional expression. Many children never learn safe ways to show or convey tenderness, anger, enthusiasm, fear, sorrow, or love. Eventually, they lose access to their inborn ability to feel and emote. Feelingless parents cannot help but deprive their children of loving warmth and tenderness. And this absence of love is the most detrimental aspect of emotional neglect. Love is the most essential ingredient of healthy parenting. Failure to consistently express and radiate feelings of love towards children is grievous emotional neglect. So if you had emotional neglect and you didn't, you basically, if you didn't have physical neglect or you didn't have sexual abuse and it wasn't verbal, emotional neglect can be just as damaging. If we look at children, all children, doesn't matter what happens to them, it's all the same to a child. This is my opinion. Abuse is abuse, and emotional neglect is a form of abuse for whatever reasons. Even in friendships, this can happen where we can, maybe we've had emotional neglect as a child, and we will then choose partners that maybe that will, or friends that may emotionally neglect us. And we need to understand that emotional neglect is a problem and it's not normal. Okay. So emotional neglect causes children to feel worthless, unlovable, and empty. Insufficient love creates a hunger that gnaws deeply at the center of their being. Children who are unable to get love from their parents eventually seek relief from this hunger in all the wrong places. They are at risk of using food or alcohol, drugs as surrogates for love, or using compulsive study, work, or busyness to distract them from the pain of lovelessness. They are also highly susceptible to entering love relationships with people as incapable of love as their parents. Emotional neglect is especially difficult to comprehend for those adult children who were frequently told in emotionally empty words, of course we love you. So you might, where people are, definitely in childhood where they've had abuse, and they might hear their parents say, well, they're doing something out of love. So of course we love you. If the phrase, I love you, is never substantiated by loving emotional state in the parent, it cannot meet the child's needs to be loved, the need to be loved. I love you could be uttered a million times with absolutely no benefit if the emotions, actions, and communications of the parent are not truly loving. Emotional love is a feeling that cannot be directly perceived or measured. Because of this, many of us use denial and minimalization to dismiss or to devalue the importance. Yet when love is truly felt, it is as real as the smell of jasmine and the taste of honey. In fact, when love is fully felt or emoted, it is so palatable that it is almost hyper-real. Love adds richness and meaning to life as nothing else can. For the infant child, love is essential as food for the maintenance of life and growth. Many survivors suffer intensely from a lack of love without knowing that it is the lovelessness that causes them so much pain. Some of us reside incessantly in this pain because we were forced to give up on on intimacy so early in life. It is gravely important that we comprehend the immeasurable loss of such replenishment. Loving connection with others is our emotional lifeblood, and without it, few of us are able to really value our lives. Many of us do not discover our yearning for the manner of intimacy until we open up to our grieving or are graced with at least one truly loving friend or ally. So then there's a section here on mirroring. So this is by Nancy Friday that he mentions, somebody that wrote this. Out of this will come a person who is going to have a good image of herself, someone who will be able to walk into a room without undue shyness, believe that other people like her, accept praise for her work as due, and smile at the nice reflection of herself in other people's eyes, just as she smiles back at what she sees in the mirror. So as children, when we're learning the very early years and, through our childhood, we learn by mirroring. So if a mother or a father, is joyful with a baby, then the baby will laugh back. And if there is disdain in those early years, then that is what the imprint will be. It will, and then we will interject that and we will feel that in our hearts as we're developing. We're not aware that that's what's going on, but this is what goes on. So we have to look, and if you feel that you've maybe yourself, I will title this video, emotional neglect, because I think that it's a really important subject and it must not be overlooked as a form, that it is a form of abuse. Emotional neglect is a form of abuse. The strongest channel for conveying love to an infant is an emotional one. Infants prosper from warm and tender heart-to-heart connections with their parents. When parents emote love, their infants are filled with feelings of peace, safety, and well-being. Real love often makes them smile and coo with delight. Infants quickly learn to associate parental love with the smiling, appreciative facial expressions of their parents. When infants or young children gaze into their parents' eyes, it is as if they are looking to find a pleasing picture of themselves reflected there. Therapists call this mirroring, and children can actually see a mirror-like reflection of themselves in the pupils of their parents' eyes, in the right light and at the right distance. You can test this for yourself by looking for your reflection in a friend's pupils from about 12 inches away. Mirrors also refer to the overall impression that parents reflect back to their children. When they look at the children, they can reflect back either a positive or a negative image. If children see displeasure in their parents' expressions, it is as if they themselves are displeasing. If instead they see delight and love, it is as if they themselves are delightful and lovable. Smiles, hugs, lap time, tender touch, melody, tone of music, and greetings of welcome are the natural physical manifestations of loving feelings. These signals soothe children and convey to them living proof that they are lovable. The very foundation of self-esteem, as well as the basic nature and structure, is cemented with ongoing experiences of feeling parental love. Children are able to feel good about themselves to the degree that they have warm, relatively constant, loving connections with their parents. Parents, of course, cannot feel or act lovingly all the time. We've got to take that on board as well. So, because we're human. Nonetheless, responsible parents, and this would be good enough parenting, emotionally feed their children with generous amounts of loving gestures that are at least sometimes accompanied by genuine love and acceptance. And then there's another bit here of Scott Peck and its failure to thrive. Totally dependent and totally at the mercy of its parents for all forms of subsistence and means of survival, to the child, abandonment by its parents is the equivalent to death. And this is really important. If you think of, maybe some geographics in the world or in history where maybe in children's homes or institutions where children, were not loved and just left in cots. I think I've seen this in, in documentaries in Russia, and I'm not picking Russia in particular, but I remember seeing a documentary and of orphans and children that are not given love. It is a death to them. They need the play. They need they need to know that they are loved. And as adults, we've got to watch this, because if we've not had that in childhood, we are definitely going to repeat it and play it out in our adult lives. And we don't know why, because we might think, well, they didn't beat me, they didn't sexually abuse me, they weren't verbally abusive. So this is one area that's really important to address, again, as I've already said. Continuing reading. Anyone who has taken a course in basic psychology has probably seen the poignant film of Harlow's experiment with the baby monkeys. In this awful experiment, baby monkeys are raised without real mothers. They are instead provided with two different surrogate mothers. One artificial mother is made of wire, has a nipple that dispenses milk. The other is made of a soft, cuddly material, but provides no milk. In one part of this experiment, baby monkeys invariably turn to the soft mothers for sleep and comfort, even though they get all of their food from the wire mothers. In another part of the experiment, baby monkeys raised only with wire mothers do not survive, which is quite frightening if you think so. That although the baby's getting the food, he's not getting any warmth. Human babies have the same need for softness, affection, and touch of a loving parent. Babies who are not constantly picked up and cuddled sometimes die. The role of lack of touch in infant mortality has been well documented in many orphanages and pediatric hospitals. The fatal syndrome is known as failure to thrive. Failure to thrive is not an all or none issue, however. Only extreme cases of emotional and tactile neglect lead to physical death. Less extreme instances of emotional deprivation may still cause serious consequences. The child's body and mind may develop normally, but his spirit and soul may atrophy. I think, Matt says. In our culture, so many of us are raised on famine-like rations of love that few of us thrive spiritually or emotionally. So now he goes on, Alice Miller, and she's talking about healing emotional neglect, this bit here. Now, the patient does not make light of manifestations of himself anymore, does not laugh or jeer at them. This would mean I can be sad or happy whenever anything makes me sad or happy. I don't have to look cheerful for someone else, and I don't have to suppress my distress or anxiety to fill other people's needs. I can be angry and no one will die. So we've got to know that we can have all of those feelings and still be loved. We can have all of those emotions and somebody will still love us. And again, we can love others and know that, we all have our moods. Going on, developing a loving heart-centered connection with oneself is an essential process of recovery. Many of us who suffered ongoing rejection from our parents initially find this proposition inconceivable, but I believe that almost everyone can learn to give themselves the love they need and deserve. In the early stages of recovery, survivors sometimes need a great deal of modeling and nurturing from others to regerminate the seed of self-compassion and keep it growing and developing. Some survivors are lucky enough to get this from authentically loving friends and allies. Those who are not so fortunate may need to work with a heart-centered psychotherapist. Survivors who are constantly neglected or abused may require years of therapy before they're able to begin to get that they are indeed lovable. Therapists who help their clients rediscover their lovableness are usually those who naturally proffer Galway's Kinnell's poetic sentiment. I think I've said that name right. And this is what this poetic sentiment is. The bud stands for all things, even those that don't flower, because everything flowers from within, of self-blessing. Though sometimes it is necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness, to put a hand on its brow and retell it in words and in heart, it is lovely, until it flowers again from within, or self-blessing. And I can say that, in part of my development, I had this in psychoanalysis, I learned that, you know, it didn't matter what mood I showed up in the 2 years that I had trauma psychoanalysis, you know, there was somebody there for me every week. So this is the great thing about having therapy long term, that we can learn to bond with somebody that just doesn't disappear on us. We also have, he goes on to say, it has been professionally taboo for many years for therapists to talk about loving their clients. At long last, more and more therapists are coming to believe that love is the most essential healing ingredient of the therapeutic process. Carl Rogers, the pioneer and perhaps most influential voice of humanistic psychology, used the term unconditional positive regard to describe love, which he regarded as the most important principle of therapeutic healing. And renowned psychiatrist M. Scott Peck strongly embraces Jung's position in the following statement from The Road Less Traveled. So I'm reading this section now from Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. It is no more inappropriate for the psychotherapist to have feelings of love for a patient than it is for a good parent to have feelings of love for a child. To the contrary, it is essential for the therapist to love the patient for therapy to be successful. And there is nothing inappropriate about patients coming to love a therapist who truly listens to them for hour after hour in a non-judgmental way, who truly accepts them as they probably have never been accepted before, who totally refrains from using them, and who has been helpful in alleviating their suffering, so that the patient can experience a successful love relationship, often for the first time. So, you know, I could explain that more about the trauma psychoanalysis I had and how that taught me, you know, to begin to love myself again as well. He goes on to say that Brian Whitten, psychotherapist and co-founder of the Department of Transpersonal Psychology at John F. Kennedy University, also embraces this position. Clients who change most in psychotherapy are often those whose relationships with their therapists are full of love. This suggests that the primary healing power in psychotherapy is not insight, but love. Further, to support this position comes from a famous survey reported in a number of psychotherapy journals that once queried a large sample of clients who were treated with a wide variety of therapeutic approaches. And when asked what was of the greatest help to them, the most common response across the board was that they felt that their therapist had really cared about them. Once clients internalize the love of the therapist and turn it into self-compassion, they then begin to become a primary source of love for themselves. And while self-support never replaces the need for the love of others, healthy self-love invariably attracts mutually loving relationships with others. As our impediments to experiencing a loving heart connection with oneself are dissolved, it becomes easier and easier to receive love from others and to radiate it towards them in return. So that's that section today. And then I will read another section from chapter 8, yes, it is from this book, in the coming week. I hope if you got some good, I'd like some feedback. So if you enjoyed that and you got something out of it, I'd really like some feedback. You can leave some messages below the video. Thanks for listening. Catch you later.